All right, guys, back here on Southeastern 14 with Chase Robinson. We continue our look at all the SEC football schedules entering the 2024 season. And boy, are we about to get to a good one. And we'll tell you why. This may be the toughest schedule in the country, maybe one of the toughest schedules I've seen in the SEC in a while, Chase, as we start to get into it, talking about the Florida Gators. Before we do that, let's tell you about our friends at Bet Online here quickly, your number one source for all the games that you want to keep an eye on. Certainly, if you're watching this, the NBA Finals are over. Stanley Cup playoffs still going as of right this second, but may not be. But of course, there's baseball, soccer, everything else you need there. So they've got every stat, every matchup, live odds and spreads, what game are being played. When it's over, you can head to the online casino, get on a game of blackjack or poker, unwind with one of over 150 slots games. All you got to do is head to the website today, get on the action, use that promo code BELIEVE, BLEAV, for your 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit. Bet online. The game starts here. All right, Chase, here we go. The Florida Gators. They are certainly entering a big season for Billy Napier. We know the importance of this year, and we also know that they are staring down one of, like I said, the toughest schedules. I mean, Phil still has it ranked as the toughest schedule in the country. No surprise there. Probably no surprise for Florida fans either, because it seems like this has just been the way it has worked in recent years, which, if you think about it, it's not just the SEC schedule, but it is, always having Florida State on the schedule, who has certainly taken a big step forward. As we know, last year, they had that road trip to Utah. But now you look at this schedule as a whole, and we're going to go through it game by game here. I mean, there is no let up anywhere when you look at this schedule.
There's not, and that if you're a Florida fan, like you mentioned, you're kind of used to tough schedules, but I feel like this is tougher than it normally is, and I think that part of that is you're starting out against Miami, a team from your home state. You get that one at home, but still, I think Miami is going to be much improved just from what I'm hearing about the Hurricanes. So that's a tough game right off the bat. Now, Billy Napier has performed somewhat well in openers that he's coached in. Even if they haven't won them, they played well. But still, I mean, this is a really tough game against a good Miami team to start things out for the year. And you mentioned you have some smaller schools mixed in there, but they're not pushovers. I mean, Samford was a team, and they're an FCS team, but 2 years ago they were a semifinal team in the FCS. I mean, and you'll see UCF down the road there. They got some good. So this is even the what some people would call the pushover teams, the cupcake games. Well, they're not that easy as well for Florida, and that's part of it this year for the Gators. But yeah, starting off with Miami, I feel like is a really tough draw, especially with being an in-state game, somewhat of a rivalry there with the team in-state who's going to be pretty good as well.
Yeah, like you said, I think it's certainly a Miami program. Feels like it's moving in the right direction. Last time they played, that was what was that? August 24th. That was 2019. Florida won that game 24-20. Miami had kind of had their number in the previous meetings before that, but they hadn't met a ton. You'd have to go back to probably the mid 80s when they were playing more frequently. They did play 4 years in a row, from 2001 to 2004, but after that, kind of bounced around everywhere. And yeah, I mean, this is kind of a series where you've seen some pretty close games. You've seen some blowouts. This is one, as we said, will be very important for the Gators. And, you mentioned that you got Samford after that, a program that's had success in recent years. And then, you've got Texas A&M, and we talk about just the importance of home games on this schedule for Florida. I mean, it is so important to serve hold at home, because you look at the games they're going to play against, again, teams like Miami, teams like Texas A&M, UCF, Kentucky, games like that. I mean, we know the Aggies are loaded with talent, but this does feel like one of those games where, depending on how the Miami game goes, if it doesn't go your way, you're looking at the possibility of like a 1-2 start if you lose at home to A&M here. Then you got to go on the road, even against the team that, Mississippi State's probably going to be picked last. If we were still doing the divisions, they would be picked probably behind most of those teams. But I think you look at it from this standpoint, I mean, we talk about swing games. Here's one right here, very early on.
Yeah, and this is so important. This game right here. I mean, you've got it at home. It's the first conference game. A lot of unknowns about A&M. I think they're going to be pretty good under Mike Elko, but still, I mean, if you're able to get this win at home to start conference play out with a win, I think that's going to totally change kind of the narrative around this season for Florida. There's a lot of negativity about Florida, about this schedule, but if you can get A&M at home, win that game before going on the road to Mississippi State, that'd be a huge statement for kind of for Billy Napier and where he's got the program. I think Florida is going to be better than they were last year. I think they've got some better players, but with the schedule, it's hard to tell what's going to happen. And A&M, I think it's really good they have this one at home. If you have a road game, your first conference game, especially for a team like Florida, that's tough. But being able to have your first 3 games at home, but your first conference game at home against A&M, who we don't know a lot about, I think that could be really big. And again, it could be a statement win for Florida if they're able to get this one.
Yeah, Gators got that big win a couple years ago in College Station, but we'll see how this one plays out. New start for the Aggies with Mike Elko, and yeah, we'll see again how things play out with this one. Again, kind of the same theme for the next game. They're going to play at Mississippi State, like we said. I think a team that will be picked lower by a lot of people. Probably a year where you feel like Jeff Lebby's going to have to put some pieces in place and try to get the most out of the roster he has as they continue to rebuild the roster moving forward. But it is a road game, in SEC play, and as I said, before even going any further on the schedule, I feel like this is the part where, let's look up and let's say Florida's 3-1 somewhere in here. You should be thrilled, I think, if you're a Florida fan coming out of this at 3-1, whether it's in any combination that you get those 3 wins. Is 2-2, if you put the betting odds on it right now, would 2-2 be the more likely possibility? Maybe. But I think when you start to look beyond this game at Mississippi State, you also understand how important this game is, because it is one where I think Florida's more talented, but it is a road game, Davis Wade Stadium. It's an early kickoff, as we see here on the schedule. So another kind of tricky spot for the Gators.
It is. And again, they, at this point, a lot of teams, it takes a few weeks to kind of learn about your team, and especially some of these schedules who have the easier teams at the beginning. But Florida's going to know what they have by this Mississippi State game, because they would have played Miami and A&M and Samford. And so you're going to know kind of what this Florida Gators team is when they go to Starkville. So I think this, again, is another really important game, your first road game. How do they handle that? Where's their head at? If they have dropped a couple at this point, are they still motivated to play at this point? Because you got a lot of football left. You got a bye week coming up. I think the bye week comes at a good point after this Mississippi State game for them to then take a deep breath, whatever happens, the first kind of 4 games, first little section of the season, take a deep breath and kind of figure out what's next. Where are we at this point? Again, they'll know by this point what they have and how they're playing, how they're executing.
Yep, I think so too. And then we talk about the week off, and now I think is where things really start to pick up considerably with the schedule. And not to say that you already potentially are looking at 2 top 25 teams in the first several games, but now I think is where, again, things start to get a little interesting and perilous, I guess, depending on how you navigate this. So UCF comes up after the bye week. Now, UCF considered probably, I would say they're not going to be a preseason top 25 team, but they're not that far away from it, probably for most people when you look at what they have there coming into the season. And so the last time these 2 teams played, that would have been the Gasparilla Bowl in 2021. UCF won that game 29-17. They've only played 3, I think, times all time between these teams, and Florida won the first 2 meetings, 1999, 2006. That was long ago. But, man, you want to talk about a game that you're getting Miami, you play UCF, 2 in-state teams here, and the importance of winning those kind of games. Like we said, Chase, no clue where Florida's at on October 5th, but you would expect this to be a very tough game, no matter what.
What an interesting game. KJ Jefferson's the quarterback at UCF now.
Right.
They've struggled with KJ Jefferson in his time at Arkansas. Gus Malzahn is the head coach there at UCF. This is brewing to be a really good UCF team. I think so. I've always been a Gus Malzahn fan. I think he's a great offensive mind. And when he has a quarterback like KJ Jefferson, a guy who can run and throw, I mean, that's just a perfect storm for Malzahn. So this is going to be a tough game for Florida. I really think so. But again, if you're able to win this one, it's at home. Again, it's against an in-state team. I think that'll be really big. You look at that game and you think, well, that's not going to be big if Florida beats UCF. I think it is this season. I think so. I mean, this is just adding to the toughness of the schedule that Florida has. I mean, because you look ahead, you go on a trip to Knoxville the next week. So This is a game you got to buckle up. You got to play good because, again, if you drop a game like this, any team, if you drop a game like this, especially with a team in your state, that really deflates your season. So you win this game, you get a little momentum heading into the next week in Knoxville.
All right. So we're going to talk about these games, but let's just the visual of the rest of this schedule. If we just take it from October 12th on, and like we said, we're not discounting any of the games we've already talked about, but if you look at October the 12th on, at Tennessee, Kentucky, Georgia, at Texas, LSU, Ole Miss, at Florida State, I don't know, Chase. Like, I'm sure I could probably look back, but I don't remember a team playing this kind of schedule. Now, we know the addition of Texas and Oklahoma, that makes you're going to get more of these because of the way the schedule can fall. But, I mean, realistically, if you look at the rest of the teams that Florida is going to play here, it is not out of the realm of possibility that Florida is going to be the underdog in every game in these, right?
Yeah.
I mean,
oh yeah,
maybe a couple point favorite against Kentucky, depending on where things are. All the road games, you would think probably not going to be the favorite unless, like we said, maybe, who knows, Florida starts 5-0, something like that, then things can change. But if you're just going on the expectations right now based on how the schedule falls, it seems like a very tough thing. And now you start things off of this stretch, which, like we said, you can probably throw UCF into that given how good they're going to be. But you go to Tennessee, who's going to have revenge on their minds. We all know what happened last year in the Swamp. And now you got a Tennessee team that will want some revenge here. And again, that starts the next set of the schedule, which is just incredible to think that it all starts here. The unusual spot for Florida and Tennessee, we're used to seeing it earlier in the season. Now it's going to be played, mid-October this year. But man, it's hard not to just talk. It's hard to talk about just one game when you look at the entire schedule as a whole here, because every game looks like it is just the most intimidating game, that you see on the schedule. So,
yeah, it's crazy. It's crazy how they got all these teams on the schedule. That Tennessee game, if this was in Gainesville, I would have a different opinion on this game. I don't know what it is. Tennessee just struggles in the Swamp. We saw it last year. Florida won that game 29-16 over Tennessee, over a decent Tennessee team. But with it being in Knoxville, and again, Tennessee, that's the last thing they wanted to do last year was drop a game to Florida. So I think it'll, like you said, be a revenge game for Tennessee at home. So that's a really a tough game to go into. I think the Kentucky matchup, when they get Kentucky at home, I think this may be one of the – we talked about A&M being a huge game. I think this may be one of the biggest games of the year for Florida. Because, again, you get it at home. At this point, a number of things could have happened. But you go out and get this win, a team who also, in the past has struggled down in the Swamp. So you take advantage of that. You get a win here. I think that could be huge, maybe a momentum swing for the season. Again, they could be on a great start at this point. But if they're not, you win this game. And I think that can totally change your mindset going into what is going to be a very tough last stretch of games. So I kind of circle that game against Kentucky as being really, really important as far as confidence goes for the rest of the year.
Yeah, I agree, because keep in mind, too, Kentucky's now won 3 in a row in this series, and that is just not something that we're used to seeing with Florida and Kentucky, because, again, you kind of look back before that, and Florida just dominated. I mean, absolutely dominated this series for the past, 30 years or so.
Yeah.
I mean, Kentucky had won, they won in 2018, but before that, they had not beaten Florida since 1986, and so – but now they've got all the momentum. And so, Kentucky a lot more confident in this series. And like you said, this is kind of that swing type game on the schedule for Florida, and very important, I'm sure, for Billy Napier at this point in the season
He
because, as we as we
he
said,
needs to be.
Chase,
He's never beaten Kentucky.
right?
He's never beaten Kentucky. He has got to do that as Florida's head coach. That's just
Yep.
something that they expect you to do. You said the history, and he hasn't done that yet. So this game, another reason why it's very important.
Yeah, and like if you are projecting, like we said, if you're projecting ahead, knowing you're probably going to drop a game or two or more before that game, like that is so important because, like we mentioned, look at the final 5 games on the schedule here after this bye week: Georgia, Texas, LSU, Ole Miss, Florida State, all teams that feel like they have a great chance to make the college football playoff. And you've already played a couple of those. I mean, and so now you've got this many left on your schedule. We all know kind of, the Florida Georgia game, what it means, all of that. And then you talk about, like game at Texas and then LSU and Ole Miss. Like these are just, I don't even know how you sort of differentiate the challenges of each of these because they all are just so intimidating. And it's like, you have 2 of those at home, the LSU Ole Miss games. You've, of course, got the one in Jacksonville against Georgia, but you got to go to Austin. You got to go to Tallahassee. And like I said, it's just as of right now, if they put the way too early spreads, which I'm sure someone has, I don't know if our friends at Bet Online do, we'll have to look at it. But Florida's an underdog in all of these games, and a couple of these maybe significant underdogs. So,
Yeah, LSU is the only team on this list that is borderline playoff. Georgia's going to be in it, barring something crazy. Texas, barring something crazy, will be in. Same for Ole Miss. Same for Florida State. I expect them to win the ACC or come close to it. LSU is the only team where I'm like, well, they could or could not make the playoff, depending on how their defense is. So that is 4 pretty probable playoff teams in there. That is crazy that they get those 4 teams and then a really good LSU team in the last 5 games of the season. It's bizarre how they ended up with all these on their schedule. But yeah, it's hard to differentiate because they're all really good teams. I'm looking at the schedule here. They do get LSU at home. They do get Ole Miss at home. And 4 of the 5 are in the state of Florida at least, so they can get a good crowd there. But still, I mean, that's tough. Again, I think it's good they don't have to go to LSU. They don't have to go to Ole Miss. I think that's 2 positives. But a long trip to Texas against a really good Texas team. I mean, it's just a brutal last stretch here. I mean, you would think they could spread them out or something.
Yeah, and that's the thing. Like when you look at just the way this schedule sets up, and remember too, we talk about teams that have winning streaks against Florida right now. LSU also has a big winning streak against Florida. Like they have won 5 in a row now against the Gators, and all those games have been high scoring. Like the lowest either team has scored in those games has been 28 points. So a lot of high scoring games the past 5 years between these two. But LSU has kind of had Florida's number even probably over the last decade. I think Florida's only got a couple wins in there. So when you just think about it, and like I know to some Florida fans, it's going to sound like, hey, we're being pessimistic or whatever. Like it's just the facts that this is. I mean, you can kind of pride yourself on it. Like we are playing the toughest schedule in the country, and I think we could look at any other schedule out there. There's just at least going into the season. Now it could change very quickly. Miami could be disappointing. A&M could be disappointing. Teams like that, they just could maybe not be what you think they're going to be. Maybe another one of those big teams, like we said, college football playoff type teams. Maybe there's a big injury somewhere or something. It completely throws up. You just don't know. But going into the season, I've not seen a schedule set up like this. And even like you said, I think the expectation in Florida is going to be better, but it's just a matter of you can be better and still not get the amount of wins you think you should get based on having to play a gauntlet like this of all these really, really good teams.
Yeah, it's tough. And but I mean, hopefully I hope the best for every SEC team, and I hope we see a lot of good talent that they've worked in there at Florida. And I know they've made some staff changes. They've got some guys in out of the portal and everything that you need to do to make a better team. So we'll see if it happens. And they may fare well in a lot of these games, better than we think. But we'll just have to wait and see. And I think there's still a lot of questions about Florida, and we'll have to wait till August 31st when they take the field at home against Miami to kind of see where this team is at.
Yep, we will find out what happens with the Gators and see where things go from here. But as always, guys, we appreciate you watching. Check out all the other schedule previews we've done here at Southeastern 14 to get you ready for the start of SEC football season. We also have our show, the SEC Football Hour. Chase and Chris Lee have fun on that each week, so you can check out all of the episodes, already 3 up on that. And as always, if you want to sponsor the show or reach out, you can do that, caroline.smith at southeastern14.com. And we appreciate you watching as always. And we'll talk to you again here soon at Southeastern 14.